happening tonight in Vancouver.
Students will no longer be grouped into cohorts or learning groups.
When classes are back in at BC schools this fall, they are going to look a lot like they did before the pandemic, but not everything will be back to normal just yet.
I think until we know everyone is protected, no one is protected. And I don't think we should leave anyone behind.
Well, given our schools are going to look a lot more like they did before the pandemic when kids head back to class in September, what can parents and students do to better navigate the return to school with nearly no restrictions?
An mRNA vaccine should now be offered as a second dose for individuals who received a first dose of AstraZeneca.
NACI says it's no longer recommending AstraZeneca vaccines now that there are enough mRNA shots to go around.
This is City News everywhere.
Students will be back in the classroom for full-time in-person instruction and the return to a near normal start to school in September.
This means students and teachers will no longer have to stick to cohorts and learning groups. Field trips and even school assemblies are possible, but it won't be a free-for-all.
Still some of those crowding points and making sure that the mixing and mingling in the hallways is still measured. So that might mean timing of classes, timing of people coming and going.
Wearing a mask will likely be a personal choice by then, but safety measures like hand washing, health checks, and staying home when sick will stay, as will vigilant case management, surveillance testing, and rapid response to exposures.
It may mean that some classes may need to make sure that children are staying home and that they will be notifying families. So we'll be working with the schools, and it is probable, we have it every year where we have influenza clusters that happen in schools, and we'll be managing them the same way.
But having so many people vaccinated by September, she says, means fewer transmissions everywhere, protection for those who can't be vaccinated, and life getting closer to normal.
We are looking forward to the potential of starting regular school in September. We're all excited about that,
But with 2 kids, one in elementary, one in high school, she's worried too much is being promised too soon.
And if we're telling parents and kids now that they can start mixing and mingling, then that's the attitude they're going to have in September. And then to backtrack on that is going to be really hard.
The teachers union overall pleased with the plan, including hearing it can change if the COVID situation does, but wants more mental health supports, including trauma-informed training for all staff.
We've all been through a very traumatic experience with the pandemic. In particular, teachers have felt the real burden of keeping everyone safe when the measures weren't adequate to do that. And so there's been a real toll taken.
Part of new one-time funding of $25 million from the province for schools this fall is $5 million for mental health. This is good, she says, but more is needed. Also on the BCTF list of concerns is improved ventilation for schools across the board.
That work is all ongoing, and we won't be really stopping any of that during the summer so that we can prepare for a safe start in September.
For City News in Victoria, I'm News 1130's Lisa Eusda.
An mRNA vaccine should now be offered as a second dose for individuals who received a first dose of AstraZeneca or Covishield vaccine.
Canada's National Vaccine Advisory Body is now recommending mRNA shots for your second COVID vaccine, even if your first dose was AstraZeneca.
The emerging evidence suggesting better immune responses when a first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine is followed by a second dose of the Pfizer, BioNTech, or Moderna mRNA vaccines.
This means AstraZeneca is not recommended by NACI except in cases where mRNA vaccines may present an allergy risk or mRNA shots aren't available. NACI says it's guided by new studies out of Germany that show the risk of mixing and matching is low, but there's no regrets with their earlier advice.
NACI's earlier recommendation that people who wanted earlier vaccinations could receive a viral vector vaccine rather than wait for an mRNA vaccine reflected the limited supply of mRNA vaccines at the time.
Those supply issues may largely be over as Pfizer and Moderna are delivering doses in significant numbers. Moderna will be shipping an extra 1.5 million doses to Canada next month, 8.5 million in total in 3 shipments. And while Pfizer says it'll have to adjust its delivery schedule, the numbers will be the same in total.
They have committed to deliver the full number of doses expected for the month of July. However, we now expect lower allocations in early July and larger allocations later in July to offset.
Now, as for AstraZeneca, there are around 600,000 doses remaining in Canada, though with NACI's new recommendation, it'll now be up to provinces to decide what to do with them. In Ottawa, Xiaoli Li, City News.
Now, BC's Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, says today's recommendation from the National Advisory Committee on Immunization about people who first got AstraZeneca to now get Pfizer or Moderna for their second shot is based on a very small study. Henry says studies and data from around the world show there is good protection from all the vaccines. And in BC, the advice has not changed. 2 doses of whatever vaccine you can get are all safe and effective.
As a result, here in BC, our advice has not changed. You make the choice that is right for you because all the vaccines that we have here in use in BC are safe and highly effective, and so are all of the options. We will continue to watch how all of these vaccines are working, and there are additional studies underway, so more information will come up. And we'll let you know if we change this information. But I think we can be very reassured that 2 doses of whatever vaccine you receive are safe and effective and work here in BC.
Today, BC reporting 120 new COVID-19 cases and 1 new death. 76.5% of all adults in BC have now had at least 1 vaccine dose, and almost 18% of all adult population is fully immunized.
You could call it the light at the end of the tunnel, with BC students expected to go back to class at near normal conditions this fall. But they're also going back in a world where we're still living with COVID-19, a virus that is expected to stay with us. So how do parents, teachers, and students navigate that?
My inbox is lit up. It's been a little quiet the last few days, and it's kind of been a relief in some ways. Like, I love hearing from people, but just to know that there was a bit of calm, and now it's all stirred up again.
Kathy Marlis created the BC COVID School Tracker page as a platform for public info sharing about exposures and cases in schools. Depending on the way things go, she's worried not enough information will be shared about exposures down the line.
I think we need to keep those layers of protection, whether our public health officer agrees to keep them there or not. We can choose to keep our kids as safe as possible.
Dr. Anna Wolak, a family physician based in Vancouver, agrees.
When we go back to school in September, yes, all the adults in the school will have been vaccinated. Hopefully all the children 12 and up will have been vaccinated, but we still have the 12 and unders who we still need to protect.
A more fulsome return is inevitable, especially since, according to one child psychiatrist, for most kids, being removed from opportunities to interact in person has been detrimental to youngsters. That means parents will have to find a balance.
There are some students who are able to function quite well independently, working perhaps with Zoom or using their textbooks and things online. But others need to have an awful lot more clear direction and support from teachers. And those are ones who are most at risk to falling behind.
That means as your child gets ready to go back to class in September, having open and honest conversations with them about how they're feeling, given many of them have been in an atypical learning environment for 15 months.
Assist kids in understanding what their experiences have been, and to be able to see that certainly it has been to a detriment for them, but we are coming out of this. We have a future to look forward to.
Ahead of this return to school, Dr. Wolak says it's important to be in tune with your health.
Masks on everybody, and staying home when you're sick.
And if there's one silver lining, it's that there are other illnesses that this could apply to, seeing as we only had 1 case of the flu in BC last year.
We've gone 15 months without a cold, so people will be more accepting of it should it come to that.
In Vancouver, Ria Renouf, City News.
COVID-19 may have another long-haul effect, and this one hits your pocketbook.
And Albertans and Canadians, regardless of where they live, expect that it's going to hit them even harder.
Homicide investigators have now taken over the case involving a missing Burnaby Man. 33-year-old Parminder Rai was reported missing by family members on June 9th, several days after he was last seen at his home not far from SFU. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team says foul play is suspected, adding Rai was known to police and has some ties to gang and drug activity.
What we've learned and what the Burnaby RCMP learned is that things just didn't connect. And of course, when we checked Mr. Rai's name, looked further into his background, his interactions with police, when we put those things together, we made that determination like, look, this isn't just somebody just going missing. We believe that somebody did something to Mr. Rai.
Anyone with information should contact the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team or Crime Stoppers. You may be in for some tough luck if you're trying to catch a BC ferry today. There have been huge lineups all day and massive waits on all major routes. It seems many are trying to get a jump start on Father's Day, as well as the first weekend without provincial travel restrictions. So if you don't have a reservation, you could be forced to wait a long time or may not be able to get on a vessel at all today. BC Ferries now saying some extra sailings will be added for the Father's Day weekend.
It's important that we preserve this for generations to come.
Vancouver City councillors have been meeting with community leaders in Chinatown this week to talk about challenges in the neighborhood. Just ahead, the future of Chinatown post-COVID and beyond.
A group hoping to keep the Mounties in Surrey is one step closer to forcing a referendum. That after Elections BC approved a petition that could trigger a vote, potentially putting the future of Surrey Police in question. The Surrey Police Vote Initiative is being led by Darlene Bennett, whose husband was killed in a case of mistaken identity in June 2018. She says there's been no clear plan, feasibility study, or case made that switching to a municipal force would come with added public safety benefit.
I hope this gives the residents of Surrey a voice. I hope they will be heard, and I hope everyone is able to make an informed decision.
If held, the referendum would include a single question around whether Surrey should retain the RCMP as its police force or create a new one. The mayor says this development will not slow down the building of Surrey's new police force. You'll soon have to watch your speed in 6 Surrey neighborhoods as part of a pilot project set to be officially launched Thursday. Speeds will be limited to 30 kilometers an hour in 3 neighborhoods, 40 in 3 others. A statement from the city says the pilot will study how lower speed limits affect driver behavior and safety on the roads. Surrey Slow Streets is set to run through December 2022. Signs will be placed in front of each zone to alert drivers they are entering a slow street area.
How can we really ensure a vibrant future for Chinatown?
It has to be a cohesive movement between cultural, economic, and the social elements.
Vancouver City councillors have been meeting with community leaders in Chinatown about challenges the neighborhood is facing. Cleanliness, graffiti, and public safety have been top of mind as the historic area begins recovering from the pandemic.
Well, it's bringing us back into a safe place so that tourists can come back and enjoy the sights and sounds of Chinatown. But also for our seniors. This is a living room for our seniors in the area. And many of the seniors right now are just scared to come back to Chinatown until we are back and running again.
How much graffiti we're dealing with, and kind of crime and street disorder, and really I think concerns that Chinatown is not it's not surviving the COVID very well.
Jordan Eng of the Vancouver Chinatown Business Improvement Association says many of the older shops on Pender Street have been essentially shut down, while the newer businesses are doing well.
Businesses that have patios that are open, that are catering to the young people coming into the neighborhood and enjoying themselves with a meal. And those businesses have done quite well. It's the older businesses that have really represented the cultural history of Chinatown that are having a tough time.
Business owner Zan He grew up in Chinatown in the 90s and says the progress of the neighborhood relies on combining the new with the old.
There's a tea shop downstairs in Chinatown. There's a Vietnamese, really good Vietnamese restaurant. And they do it all in modern style, yet maintaining that culture. They have the frames of their ancestors and all this stuff, but yet the food is really good quality. They speak great English. They've got culture. And I think that's what's necessary to move forward, is to merge this modernization with this cultural sentiment.
One advocate for Chinese-speaking people living in SROs says the conversation about the neighborhood's revitalization focuses too much on tourism.
A lot of the conversation about tourism, about how to open up Chinatown businesses to the outside world, or like to connect the Chinatown to downtown so that we get more foot traffic. But there's actually a strong demand in Chinatown. The residents need to buy groceries, and there's a lot of different demands. If the businesses can actually have more chance and be less precarious and understanding what the residents actually need, we could get a lot better at being self-sufficient as a community.
The city is now looking into putting more resources into sanitation and graffiti cleanup, and a motion has been brought forward to apply for federal funding to support the historic neighborhood. In Vancouver, Kirjunos, City News.
Canada could soon have its first person of color on the bench of the country's Supreme Court, as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has nominated Ontario Judge Mahmoud Jamal for the spot. Jamal became a judge at the Ontario Court of Appeal 2 years ago after a lengthy career as a litigator. If Jamal's nomination is approved, he would be replacing the seat vacated by Rosalia Bella, who announced her retirement earlier this year. The approval process for the seat will begin soon with a hearing by the House of Commons Justice Committee. Legal cannabis operators in BC will be allowed to deliver directly to buyers starting on July 15th. Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth says he hopes the move will shrink the illegal markets. Only adults will be allowed to receive delivery orders, and those who appear to be under 19 will have to present 2 pieces of identification. Recipients will also have to provide their name and signature to take out delivery. Only cannabis retail store licensees and their employees will be authorized to deliver cannabis.
You're going to be doing a lot more of this, counting each penny. Now that everyday items, think gas, rent, and even groceries, are now more expensive. As inflation continues to rise, a new poll finds Canadians are much more likely to say that they're worse off now than they were a year ago, and expect the situation to worsen in the months to come. The poll by Angus Reid found more than 9 in 10 say that over the past 6 months, it's become more expensive for them to improve their home through renovations, buy a new home, fill up their tank, and buy groceries. This while 56% of renters say their monthly cost has increased as well. Residents of Alberta and Saskatchewan are the most likely to report being worse off than a year ago, while those in Ontario and BC are the most likely to say they're better off.
But this is what I would call almost a side effect of the pandemic.
The survey points to supply shortages and economic woes created by the pandemic that is partly to blame.
If you're someone whose job or whose livelihood relies on oil and gas, this has been a very long period of time where gas prices were, the low, and then you had reduced demand because of the pandemic, and now there are concerns with getting product to market.
According to Statistics Canada, Canadians are paying 3.6% more for staples than they were this time last May. However, there is some optimism as the COVID-19 vaccine rates rise and more businesses reopen. In Edmonton, Rochelle Sufi, City News.
BC is now home to Canada's highest suspension bridge, offering a view of the Rockies and Purcell Mountains. Golden Sky Bridge opened earlier this month in Golden, BC, and offers visitors a view 426 feet above a canyon. BC entered step 2 of its restart plan this week, permitting non-essential travel throughout the province. Health officials say those planning on visiting smaller communities like Golden should check for any local guidance before traveling. Vancouver's news is always available on the radio with News 1130 or online anytime at citynews1130.com. Your next edition of City News is tonight at 11 o'clock. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.